All right, seniors. Well, we are about to get into Beowulf. Depending on who you've talked to, if you've talked, one of your parents have probably gone through this, and they probably made it sound like very painful. Let me tell you something. Beowulf is not bad. It really isn't. There's a lot of great stuff in this section that we're going to be able to cover. We're going to split it into 2 days. Before we get started on the actual text today, though, I need to go over some basic terminology with you guys. We want to start with defining what an epic is. And a literary epic, particularly, is going to be an epic poem. It's going to be an extensive poem. It's going to have certain traits. All right, there's 4 characteristics of an epic, and then we're going to talk about 4 epic conventions, okay? So let's talk about the 4 traits first, characteristics of an epic. First, you're going to have a hero on a quest. So, and this hero is typically going to be larger than life. He's going to be some sort of superhuman person. Either at the beginning when it starts or at some point in the story, he will become superpowered of some sort, all right? So this character is going to be on some sort of journey throughout. Now, most stories have someone on a journey, so that by itself isn't unique, but the superhero version is. Second, there's going to be supernatural forces. There's a lot of larger-than-life qualities in these texts. There's a lot. There's monsters, there's magic, there's all sorts of crazy things that go into it. You're going to have valorous deeds. Those are going to be deeds that typically the hero does that show extreme amounts of bravery and valor. Not just small things, huge things. Finally, we'll have elevated style. Elevated style just means that it's written in a very high poetry type of form, especially for that time period. It would have been very difficult as far as, for a lot of average people to read it. Now, when it would be told over and over and over, and people would get it, because that's kind of the thing. Repetition with difficult things makes it more palatable. But anyway, elevated style just basically says lofty diction and word choice. So we're going to use our vocabulary, right? All right, now, as far as the conventions you would see in an epic, there's 4 things. I think 3, I'm sorry. There's 3. 3 epic conventions that the book wants you to know, and I'm just going to stick with the book for those of you who aren't here for me to add more stuff. Wow, it's kind of hard to put these on straight when I'm trying to look that way. All right, the first thing we're going to have is going to be a repetition, actually. Elevated style, again, is an epic convention. So you get to double dip on that one. But we're also going to have something called the plot beginning and something called in media res, and that means in the middle of. And it really means that typically these epics begin, they don't give you a lot of backstory. They drop you right into the middle of it. I mean, the Iliad, you're in after the big, a lot of the battles of the Trojan War have happened, and you're kind of dropped in there after one. And the thing is that the people listening originally would know exactly what's going on. They would know these other stories, and they would have been told over and over and over, and it's nothing to it for them to pick up. It is a little more of a chore for us, though, to pick up in the middle of things. Now, lucky for you, Beowulf's not that bad about that. Then finally, you have something called invoking the muse. This was really taken from ancient Greek and Romans, who would invoke the muse, who would be, the muse of poets or something like that, who would come through and help the singer, the bard, whatever, present their material and help make it, make people receive it. Think about when Christians talk about the Holy Spirit, this concept of, allowing the message to be conveyed through you. It's the same thing here, except instead of the Holy Spirit, we're using a muse, and instead of biblical truth, we're revealing, Beowulf and the story of a great hero, all right? So these are what we look at when we get into an epic. Now, if you'll go from, all that information, by the way, was on page 34, if you'd like to look at it. We're going to skip ahead now and look at... let's just go ahead and jump right in. I could give you some background on Beowulf. We're going to be on page 40. I could give you some background on Beowulf, but really, it's more important that we get into the story right now. Now, those of you in class may get a little bit more about it. I may even post a video with this that I pull off of YouTube to give you some background. In fact, I'll probably do that. I would like you to know that. But for the sake of brevity, let's just go ahead and jump into... the actual story, which picks up on 40. Now, we're not going to read it over this, obviously. That would be a lot. That would be pretty lengthy. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of hit the main sections and talk about what I want you to get. So we begin. Now, this one definitely begins in media res because there's actually a little more, if I remember right. I have the actual copy of Beowulf sitting right here. Let me pull it. All right, so let me make sure that I'm right about this before I kick off. Yep. Yeah. there's a little more as this begins before we get into the actual story that our book gives us. So our book drops us definitely in the middle of things. It's going to drop us into it's going to omit some of the background that probably would have put some of you off and start right with Grendel. So Beowulf's going to fight three major monsters in this text. He's going to fight Grendel, who's the most well-known. He's going to fight Grendel's mom, and he's going to fight an unnamed dragon. Okay, and all three of these are representing different types of evil. Okay, now Grendel's the most famous and most well-known, so we start with him. And then right away we find out that Grendel is a miserable being. He hates life. He's very upset. He sneaks up to Harrod, which is the name of the mead hall that these people are inhabiting, and he listens to Hrothgar, who's the king, and his warriors telling all these stories. And particularly he listens to what they would call a shop. It's spelled with a C, S-C-O-P, but it's a bard who would basically be telling stories about like the beginning of time and all these other things. And the interesting thing is that in this instance, the monster Grendel gets furious because, and this is one of the cool things that the monk who got a hold of Beowulf and composed it inserted some Christian details, and this is one of the good ones, that the bard is singing about the beginnings of time and how God made the earth and made everything in it. And Grendel hears that, and it infuriates him. Now, why would that infuriate him? Well, let's think about it for a second. If you were someone created as hideous as Grendel, and there's a guy singing about how God made all these wonderful things, the next question would have to be, then why did God make me this way? And those of you who get the copy of the book Grendel soon, when we're going to read this, it's going to talk a lot about that. There's going to be this mapping out a much bigger story here about Grendel himself. But in this, it's very limited. But Grendel's obviously furious about that. So he's like, I'm being punished for something I didn't do. I'm a monster. I don't like this. And then he gets mad. They also, now here's something else that the bard does well, is that he describes Grendel as like, it's easy for people to say, well, where did he come from? Because, if you're a missionary, you're coming over and these people actually believe in monsters like Grendel, explain to them how that's not part of Christian tradition is tough. So what he does is he says, and we're on the top of page 42 right now, he says that he was spawned in that slime conceived by a pair of those monsters born of Cain, a murderous creature banished by God, punished forever for the crime of Abel's death. So we get that the monsters, like Grendel, all descended from Cain. That was his curse, was that his children were all monsters. So interesting little spin to put on it, right? And again, the original text probably wouldn't have had that, but it's still pretty useful stuff. So the first time this happens, it gets dark. Grendel decides he's going to do something about these Norsemen. I don't want to call them Norsemen. That's not who they are, but these people. And he shows up, busts open the door, and starts killing people left and right. It says he snatched up 30 men, smashed them unknowing in their beds, and ran out with their bodies, the blood dripping behind him, back to his lair, delighted with the night's slaughter. So he goes in there and he kills 30 people. Really, really bad. And Grendel's going to represent this kind of violence over rage. He's rage is what he really is. He's pure, it's not premeditated, like evil type of murder. That's more of his mom. But Grendel himself represents this rage, and we see that throughout with him, okay? So the next morning when they wake up in Harrod, they realize what's going on, and, it's terrifying. And there's a huge, small section that covers the next little bit, but no one's able to do anything about it. Grendel shows up every night, continues to kill people, so everyone leaves, and they take off. And basically for, I think it's 12 years, does it say? I know it does say. I think it's 12 years. We'll come back and look if I'm wrong. But I think for 12 years, Grendel terrorizes these people. And basically, he'll come in at night, and he takes over the mead hall, and he stays there. Now, the only person he can't hurt is he cannot hurt the king, Hrothgar, because Hrothgar is God's chosen king for these people. Again, that divine law type thing where he's believed that he is chosen by God. So Grendel can't hurt him, but he can sure enough hurt everyone else. So now Harrod in this area, which was Hrothgar was the mightiest king in the area, is now been decimated. There's nothing really there. The building's still there. Hrothgar's still there. He's probably still got a few people around, but Grendel has basically put fear in everyone. All right. I'm trying to see if I see an actual day, but I don't. All right. Anyway, eventually word makes its way over the shores to, I believe, an area. They call it Gateland. It's the gates, but that's part of Sweden. Okay, and so word makes its way over there as bad rumors typically do. And Beowulf, this mighty hero of the gates, decides that he's going to go and deal with this monster. He takes 14. Let me make sure. Yeah, 14 people. It says the bravest and best of the gates, 14 in all, and led them down to their boat. So I don't know if he counts with the 14 or there's 15, 14 counting him. But they decide to go on the boat and head over. Now, apparently, this is a little bit of a trip, especially in the boats they had. And they do have a little bit of weather, but they get there. And as soon as they get there, they get off the boat, and the soldier who's watching the shore, because you would have to have that, because there are a lot of raids that would occur. So as they get off, the guy immediately rides down to see them and find out, hey, what's your purpose here? And just noticing Beowulf, he comments on how huge and impressive Beowulf is. And Beowulf kind of gives what they call a boast. Today we use that term in a negative connotation. Back then it wasn't supposed to be. It was more about his resume. Here's who I am. He talks about his family. He talks about all the things he's done, which is key for these people. And the officer is so impressed, he lets Beowulf go and lets them take their armor and weapons, which is a huge sign of respect because usually that wouldn't occur. And he agrees to stay and watch their boats for them. So they go head off to meet with the king who is a broken man at this point. All right, I apologize for having to look a little bit. I have my text has highlights, but they have faded out because it's hard enough to highlight in this book because of the color of the pages, but then it's faded. So I apologize with that. Beowulf gets to the king, and we're going to read pieces here. And he says, "Hail Hrothgar, Hygelac is my cousin and my king. The days of my youth have been filled with glory. Now Grendel's name is echoed in our land. Sailors have brought us stories of Heorot, the best of all mead halls, deserted and useless when the moon hangs in the skies, the sun and lit. Light and life fleeing together. My people have said, the wisest, the most knowing, and best of them, that my duty was to go to the Danes' great king. They have seen my strength for themselves, have watched me rise from the darkness of war, dripping with my enemy's blood. I drove 5 great giants into chains, chased all of that race from the earth. I swam in the blackness of night, hunting monsters out of the ocean and killing them one by one. Death was my errand and the fate they had earned." So he's basically saying about, like, here's what I've done. In fact, I love the fact, he's like, I've killed all the sea monsters. There's none left. You can't find them because I've murdered them all, which is, that's a great way to end that story. But he says, I'm here for Grendel now. And what he's doing at this point is he's allowing the king to save face. He's begging the king, let me do this for you, please. He's not in any way trying to, make the king feel like he's puny, like me strong man, me handle. He's not doing any of that. He's saying to him basically, hey, let me do you a favor and let me handle this for you because you're such a good king. All right? And, Hrothgar agrees. And so they go to bed that night, and after they party all night, which I have no idea how these people were able to drink the way they did and still stand up, let alone fight. But apparently they can. So then we have the battle with Grendel, and this is a pretty important part. It's really the iconic part of this entire epic poem, to be honest with you. So Grendel shows up like always, and is shocked to find there's actually people in the mead hall. So he grabs the first person he finds and kills him. It's one of Beowulf's followers, which must stink for Beowulf because he has to sit and watch. But then the next person he grabs is Beowulf. Now, Beowulf has decided, because this is what these people were like. We talk about traits of heroes, and this is one of their heroic traits. Beowulf's decided he's not going to fight with any armor. He says, Grendel doesn't wear armor. I shouldn't either. He also decides he's not going to use his sword because Grendel doesn't use a sword. Now, Grendel has claws and other things, but apparently Beowulf is going to be that. He's going to play on hard mode here. And so Grendel grabs him, and Beowulf reaches up and grabs him back. And by the way, it's probably a good thing he chose not to use a sword. Really convenient. Because Grendel has a special power where swords don't work on him. So as Beowulf immediately gets up to wrestle with Grendel, Grendel's immediately scared because no one's ever stood up to him. Grendel represents, again, that bully that once you finally tell him, hey, I'm not taking it anymore, he kind of backs down. And Grendel's definitely scared at this point because not only is Beowulf, brave enough to face him, Beowulf's kind of stronger than he is. Beowulf's men get up and start trying to hurt Grendel. They're swinging their swords, but does no damage because metal doesn't injure him at all. So they keep fighting, and let me see if I can find the line for you. It's pretty dark. Uh, okay, so they're fighting. Let me find it here. Um, They had planned. No. Screams of the Almighty's enemy sang in the darkness, the horrible shrieks of pain and defeat, the tears torn out of Grendel's taut throat, Hell's captive caught in the arms of him who had, of all the men on earth, was the strongest. That mighty protector of men meant to hold the monster till its life leaped out, knowing the fiend was of no use to anyone in Denmark. All of Beowulf's band had jumped from their beds, ancestral swords raised and ready, determined to protect their prince if they could. Their courage was great, but all was wasted. They could hack at Grendel from every side, trying to open a path for his evil soul, but their points could not hurt him. The sharpest and hardest iron could not scratch at his skin, for that sin-stained demon had bewitched all men's weapons and laid spells that had blunted every mortal man's blade. So there you get the idea that, nothing can hurt, no metal can hurt him anyway. All right, it says, and yet his time had come, his days were over, his death near. Down to hell he would go, swept groaning and helpless to the waiting hands of still worse fiends. Now, there's a little bit of your religious influence again, your Christian influence about the idea of hell, of where he's going to go. But we also get this idea of what we call fatalism. Fatalism is not the word fatal at the root. The word fate is the root. And by that, we mean the idea that your life is predestined and preordained and laid out for you. And these people definitely believed in that. So they're saying this fate has decreed that this time Grendel's going to lose. All right. Now he discovered, once the afflicter of men tormented their days, what it meant to feud with Almighty God. Grendel saw that his strength was deserting him, his claws bound fast, Higlac's brave follower tearing at his hands. The monster's hatred rose higher, but his power had gone. He twisted in pain, and the bleeding sinews deep in his shoulders snapped. Muscle and bone split and broke. So Beowulf literally rips his arm off. That's how he defeats him. Now, he doesn't actually directly kill him. Grendel runs out and takes off and goes back to his lair, where we'll pick up tomorrow, actually. But he takes off to hide, and Beowulf is furious because he wanted to have his head. But what he's got instead is his arm. So they mount the arm in the up in the ceiling area, and it hangs over where everyone's eating. Which, goodness gracious, what a time to live, I guess. I mean, you're going to be sitting there eating your dinner with dripping blood from a monster's hand above you, monster's arm above you, in fact. So they celebrate that night again, but something happens when they go to bed. They think they're all safe, and all of a sudden, Grendel's mom shows up, and she comes in and she kills Hrothgar's best friend. Now, this is a key with her, and I'm not going to get too much into it because we're going to cover her tomorrow. But one of the things with her is that she is about... She wants to hurt you in the worst possible way. And, Grendel was about the numbers. Grendel's mom is about quality over quantity for her. She picks the person that's going to hurt the king the most and goes after him. So that's her. And now, of course, Hrothgar is back in the same position. He's like, what do I do? We killed this first monster. How do I deal with this second one, who's a whole different type of evil? And that's where we'll pick up tomorrow. So, guys, I know I'm not reading all of this. That's more of the thing about being, trying to not fool with copyright stuff. So I apologize if you need that. But you got a copy of the text. You should. If not, let me know. I will find a way to get you a book. So, but you can read through this on your own. I just wanted to hit the high points of what happened and what I want you to get out of it, okay? So look again with your weekly agenda. See if there's some notes on there you can cover. And beyond that, you're caught up. We'll get the second half of Beowulf when we deal with Grendel's mom and all of her shenanigans tomorrow. All right, so thank you guys for listening. I hope that you're enjoying Beowulf. I hope it's not as miserable as everyone makes it sound. I personally don't think it is. So anyway, but I'm an English teacher. What do I know, right? Okay, guys, so we will see you back here for the next video.